Welcome to GameMaker2 Tutorial 5. We're going to finish our first screen today, and I'll show you more about different rooms and so on. I'll go over to the other screen so you can have a look. I'll share that now. We're going to make some other objects, and I'm going to introduce an explosion. If you have a look at this other screen now, you'll be able to see that I've shifted the balls over here. I'm going to have them connect with these new objects I've got. You should be fairly familiar by now in introducing new objects. So I've got a sprite over here, sprite 8. I simply imported an image from our resources, and the image I'm using is a sprite from the Breakout game, and it's BAT2. I'm going to use that as a kind of score object. So we're storing at the moment with collecting. I'm going to change the scoring, and I'm going to make the balls hit the end point at the end of the maze, and when it collides with this endpoint, I'm going to score for the balls ending. They'll disappear, they'll explode, and when both balls hit the endpoints, after I've collected the hamburgers, the game will end. So we'll have two different scoring objects. I'll sort that out now, and I hope you can follow me through. First of all, obviously, we needed to make an object called Object8. I think I'll change that name. I'll make it, obviously, you right click on object, you make a new object, you create the object and link it up to the sprite that I created up there by bringing in that image from our resources. You can rename your object by going rename, and I will call it, I'll call it endpoint. You'll notice I never have a gap in a name. Traditionally with programming, you always have an underscore if you're joining two words together. You never use spaces. So if we go back to our room and double click on room naught, before I go here and talk about this, I'll have a look at that object again. I'm going to make it solid as well, so you can see that this particular endpoint is a solid object, and we're going to make the ball collide with it. You might wonder about my end game screen from the last time we spoke. Room 1. I made room 1 by right-clicking and creating room. You create a new room. The other thing I'll say is that the order of the rooms are important. The game will always start at the top room and end on the bottom room. So if you move them around, you'll go to the wrong room. The exit button was already programmed last time. I've done the play button, play again button. You might remember I was talking about that. So if I went to the play button, which is play again button, which is object 6, you'll see here I've done a restart game command, which was found here amongst the game programming objects or programming tools. So when the ball connects with our end point, when it collides with the end point, we want a variety of things to happen. So that's what we'll do there. So we're going to have a collision event, and we'll have a collision with the end point. remembering the player is kicking the ball along and the aim is to get to the goal. You could use these bars that I've used for this object of the endpoint as a goal in a game of soccer or football or whatever. You can do a whole lot of things there. So when it collides with the end point, when the ball collides with the end point, we need a range of things happening. Now you'll remember that when the hamburger collides with the player, we have a similar lot of things happening. So I'll go back there and have a look at what happens. So remember here that we're changing the score. We're destroying the instance of the object we've got. We're playing an audio, which is a beep. And we're having this if statement, and we're getting to a score of 11. Now, a score of 11 or 12 isn't very satisfying, is it? So what I'm suggesting we do is when we collect our hamburgers, let's give each hamburger a value of 100, and let's say that if the end score, now there's more than 10 hamburgers, there's 11, so that would be 1100 for the hamburgers. Maybe we'll make our balls worth 500. So we could say, what about if the game gets to 2100, then it will end. So we're going to end the game at 2100. Now you might wonder why I'm here in the hamburger object, apart from changing these scores around to make them a little bit more game-like with higher score values. And I'm saving it. I always save everything I do. Make sure you save it in the right directory. What I'm going to do, and you can do this, it's called, when you do this, it's using modules of programs or modular programming. So I can use all of these objects and put them at the end, well, at the end point when the ball collides with the endpoint, because all of the logic is exactly the same, except for the value that I'm saying the ball is worth, which I said should be maybe 500. And I'll change the audio file. So I'm going to copy all of these. I'm going to select it by clicking with left mouse button. I'm now holding down the control key, and I'm selecting destroy instance, selecting if, selecting go to next room, selecting else, and selecting assign variable. I'm now going to right click on one of the objects and I'm going to copy them. Having done that, I now select the ball object, and we know that we're talking about the impact with the endpoint. I should be able to paste that code in here, and you can see here that I've been successful. I should be able to bring them all over there. Now, we don't particularly want the same beep sound. If we're going to explode the object, we really want an explosion, and we also want a different sound. But obviously 2100 is correct, but we'll change the value of the collision and the destruction of the ball to 500 points. Now that will make our score a lot longer and a lot more comprehensive, I guess, and satisfying in some ways. So what I need now is an explosion sound. So let's add a new sound. Right click on sound, create sound. I'm going to look for the file for the sound, and I think this explosion's reasonably good. Not really. I heard it, and let's try explosion 2. Let's try a different one. Try this explosion. Okay, that's not too bad. I might just keep that. We'll give it a name. We'll call it explode so we know what is happening and keep our names fairly sensible. Okay, so let's go back to our ball, and the ball is colliding with the endpoint. The sound we want is an explosion sound, so we select that. And what we want to do is to show an explosion, but we don't have one. So we want to swap the ball for an explosion object. If you notice another couple of sprites over here, there's a sprite here that I'll be showing you in tutorial 6. It's a little Mario sprite. I'll show you how to gather sprites off sprite sheets later on. But first, we're going into Photoshop, and I'm going into Photoshop for a particular reason. So I'm going to open the GIF file of the explosion in Photoshop. So I'm going to open, and editing a GIF file can be a little bit tricky. So I open the explosion file, and we can see it here. There are 7 layers. But in order for me to edit it as a GIF, I have to make sure Photoshop understands that it's a GIF. I'm going to go to Window, I go to Timeline, and here we can see the timeline, and when we select each of the layers, they're selected over on the right and made visible as we're looking at them, and we can edit them now. I'm using my magic wand tool, which is this one, my magic eraser tool, and I'm getting rid of the blues. So I will make sure I'm going to the correct layer that I am selecting. I select it on the timeline. I make sure it's visible there, and I am making changes as we go, making sure that I don't break the timeline. And the 5th one, there's only 7 of them. And number 6 and number 7. And I should export it. And I go here and I go export. Save for web. And when save for web comes up, it tells me it's a GIF with transparency. It tells me how large it is. It has frames, and you can see it's exploding there. So I can now save it by exporting it. Press the save button, and I should be able to give it a different name here. I'll call it explosion 6. I'll be able to find it, and we will keep it as a GIF file. Now we'll go to GameMaker and we'll bring in the file. I will just get rid of this because it didn't work, and I will bring in my new one. Create a sprite. I intend to import my GIF. It's explosion 6. I've made a few of them. And now we have 6 frames. We need to give it a speed. I'm not sure how many frames a second we need. We'll make it 12, and we'll see how fast it works. Maybe slow it down a little bit. And we will save it all. We need now an object, of course. Pause that, and we will make this into an object. And again, we'll call the object explode. And we'll bring the sprite in. Now, when we go to the ball, we want to swap the ball for that object. And this is a little bit tricky. So we need to go into creating an instance of another object. So we're actually bringing in our other object, which we've just made, the explosion. We're not changing it. We need to create a new instance of an object, and we need to do that right up the top. We're putting it relative to where the explosion happened, where the ball is. And we will then bring in our object. We tell it which one to bring in, and that's the object that's created. So all of that should be fine, except now we need to program that object to show its animation. And we'll do that by just going into it now. So I need to go into object 10, and in object 10, well, explode 1, I need to have a create event for this object. And I'm also going to allow the animation to proceed, and then when it's finished, I need to end the animation. So I go animation end. Once the animation's ended, then I need to destroy the instance. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to get rid of the explosion. So when the ball meets the end, it should explode. And when we get rid of all the hamburgers and the 2 balls at the end, it should end our game. I hope. I think that's all I've got written down. Oh, we've done the scores. We've got the end sprite and the explosion, and we're going into our next screen. So we'll play that, we'll save it, we'll play it, and we'll see if it works. Next time we'll have a start game screen. Well, I didn't see the balls disappear. I better do it again. I have them near the end, so they probably went to the barrier before I watched whether the explosion worked. I just need to check that, and I was going to show you as well. Oh, here we go. Ah, yes, there's an explosion down there, and here's the other ball. Not very effective. Maybe I could move it around a bit. Remember, I need to get a collection of burgers before the game will end. I think I need most of these. We've got a score of 1800. Remember, the burgers don't get to explode at the end. We need to collect them. Probably need one more. You could put the balls wherever you wanted to, and game over. So there we go. And if I play again, it just does it all again. So that's fine as well. And when I finish this time, I'll end the game, and you'll see that that will work as well. So we're up to the end screen, and the game's over. I can exit. I should make my last screen the same size as the sprites I've got on it. So let's go into the last room and we will make this room, when we're editing the room, we need the room editor, remember? So we need the layer view, we need the room properties, and we've got it down there. Now I know that my image here is 800 by 600. So if I change this room here, 800, 600, and click here, move my images over a little bit, just so that they fit on that. Obviously I should be selecting this object now and moving that across. I can't seem to grab them, which doesn't help much. Let me put that there and get rid of that one. Nope, doesn't work. Control Z. That's a bit better. There we go. Oh, that one works. Okay, so I mean, you can put these buttons wherever you like, but obviously it all works. So I'm saving that now, and that's the end of our first game. Thanks for watching. Well, if you've got this far, you're up to tutorial 6 in GameMaker 2. This will be the last tutorial in these sections, and I have managed to, at this point, make a game with 2 levels, and I'll show you how I did that. I have a start screen and an end screen. I can edit those and show you how, and I will show you how to bring in some images in groups so that you can download sprite sheets from the internet if you wish to. Now, I'll start by flipping over to the other screen and talking about some of the problems that we were discussing last time. So here you are in the second screen. This is the start game screen, and I've viewed this by double clicking on the room. Part of the problem is that I don't have the word maze on here. I could make a different sprite for the word maze, and I could bring it on the top here, but there's an easy way to do that, an easier way. If I was to double click on maze itself, I have here the capacity to edit this particular sprite. So if I was to click the edit button here, and I'm editing the image, I'm going to just select the text tool, and I'm going to use something like, I had papyrus selected. We can try that and you'll see, but you can use any font, of course. Maybe parchment might be an ancient effect. And I just want to say the word maze. I've got a size of 35 up here, and I've only got a choice of regular. So if I was to do that here, maybe 40 might be a better size. And I need to put this in the middle here. I've selected a blue color, but the play button is red, so it might be better to select a red color. And so I'm going to have the word maze more or less centered here. So we'll do that in capitals. And that is kind of a crazy font. I might change it. You can select it. We'll go back to papyrus. I didn't mind that. So I'll just leave that there like that. So it just says maze. I won't worry any more than that with this. I'm going to talk about the rooms. You'll notice when I go to the first room, and if I go down the bottom here to the start room, well, the word maze is now there, and it also says play. So that's what I wanted there. But I did have a problem with my room sizes before. Unfortunately, the research online that I did suggests that you really need to be fairly consistent with the sizes. So your start game screen and your end game screen should probably be the same size as your normal game screens. So I've used a kind of standard here of 10, 24, 7, 68, which was the default that it came up with for us. It's a reasonable size for our different rooms. I don't want to go into that any more than I have already. I also talked about moving the rooms around. Remember, you can change the order of the rooms. They're in the right order now, but if I wanted to move anything around, you do that by putting them kind of at the top above the writing there for the other room. That would put level 2 above room 0, which is level 1. And I have to now bring it, it's actually easier to bring things above other things than below. And so I've got start room 0, which was the first room we started with. I could call that level 1, level 2, end game, and so on. Now, when I went to level 2, and you can see my level 2 room here, it's quite complex. I have brought in a whole lot of other sprites, some of which were available in that resources folder that I showed you at one point. And I had a Mario sprite I talked about. Mario runs around here, he picks up jewels, he picks up money, that makes a sound, and then the score appears there. Now, the scoring object, if you remember, was an invisible object. And we'll just have a really short look at that. It's called score 1. And if you remember, it was the create, then we had the draw and so on. And I was calling it burgers. Well, in the second game, I don't want it to be called burgers. I want you to realize that I could simply, and what I did was I simply cut and pasted. Well, I didn't even do that here. I just used the same scoring object and dragged it onto the screen. When you want the code for one object to apply to a different object, you can easily select the code from an object from the previous screen and apply it to an object in this screen. So if I look at my example, there, the monster hits Mario. He goes to you go to the next room, which is the end game room. In the step command of the monster, I made this monster move in the same way as I made the hamburger move in the previous game by bouncing around evenly. So the monster will work its way around the maze. And I have a number of those there. So all I did for that was I went into the hamburger code here. You double click on that. Now you can simply right click on that and copy it. And then you can apply it to the other object that you've made based on a sprite. So you would just paste that in there. Now I already did that, so I don't have to do it. But before you do that, you add the step event, and when it connects with the player, which in this case is Mario, we can talk about that here. I finished off the other one by saying you could cut and paste the code for Mario to be exactly the same as player 1. So you can see player 1 here. When I double click on player 1, it goes up there. When it hits the wall, certain things happen, key down, and it does all of these things that our player one does, except the instant scale is reversed because Mario's pointing to the left, not the right. So down to Mario, you can see it's exactly the same. I simply made key down right, key down up and left, and for each of those, I clicked on that, then I held the control key down, and then I right click and copy it from the hamburger code, and then I paste it into Mario. So making the second level was much easier than making the first. Everything, every bit of code was the same as from the other game. When we hit a jewel, it plays a particular beeping audio. It uses sound 0. There's also sound 2. So when we hit, say, the money, we could, it's got none there, no one. We're going to make it do sound 2. If we wanted to hear sound 2, we can go up here and we can play it. It's just a little bang sound. Okay, so I think that's most of it, except that part of the problem is that I needed to show you how to do images from a strip of images, which I downloaded from the internet, and I have them in Photoshop. You can see that the one I used here for Mario was there.